if you can come to the stage. As I introduce you, Emily is the coordinator of the City of Toronto's Community Stewardship Program and has a background in arboriculture from Humber College, ecological restoration from the University of Victoria. In her role with the City of Toronto, she is able to share her passion with volunteer stewards as they work together to enhance Toronto's natural environment. In this presentation, Emily will talk about the City Volunteer Stewardship Programming and introduce a new community science research partnership on dog-strangling vine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I want to also just thank Sheila and Anna for their very inspirational presentations. As Anna mentioned, there are many different models of stewardship in Toronto. So today I will be touching on one of the models, which is a city coordinated stewardship program and research partnerships that we've participated in. So just before I get started, I want to note that the land I'm presenting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. So as you know by now, my name is Emily Heidendahl, and I am a natural environment specialist with the City of Toronto's Urban Forestry branch. And as I mentioned, I'm here today to speak about research partnerships. So I will also, as Anna did, provide some context about the natural environment for Toronto. I can respect and appreciate that not everybody here is from Toronto, although we've had a very Toronto-centric concurrent session so far. So again, we'll say that parks in Toronto, they make up about 1/5 of the land area. So that is about 17% of Toronto's land area, equivalent to more than 30 times New York City's Central Park. In this city, we have 11.5 million trees, and we have 86 environmentally significant areas. So those are the areas on this map highlighted in orange. And so those areas have features and functions that help to make the city an even healthier place. So how are invasive species managed in Toronto's natural environment? So we have forestry staff that are dedicated to invasive species management. We also hire contractors. The Toronto Conservation Authority is assisting with invasive species management throughout the city. And then, of course, we couldn't do it without the help of our amazing volunteer base. And those are volunteers throughout the city. So my team, Natural Environment and Community Programs, we focus on engaging with the community to protect, restore, and enhance the natural environment. And we do that in a few different ways. So we have one-off tree planting and stewardship events, and those are all throughout Toronto. And those are sort of a shorter term volunteer opportunity. We have education and outreach. And so this team goes around the city and connects with community members through tabling, nature walks, festivals, and other events. And then, of course, the Community Stewardship Program. So this is a longer term volunteer opportunity that connects volunteers with nature in Toronto's ravines and parks. And so this is the program that I coordinate. It is a wonderful program that I'm sure many of you know. We even have some volunteers in the audience today. So this program has volunteers meeting up on a weekly basis. And that is to remove invasive species, plant native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers, perform ecological monitoring, and to engage in educational workshops. We manage a wide range of different species. As you can imagine, in an urban environment, there are many invasive species to tackle. Here's an example of garlic mustard. So in 2015, we have Riverdale Park volunteers hand pulling garlic mustard. And so to manage invasive species, we follow existing best practices. And we prioritize invasive species management based on quality of habitat, what volunteers are able to reasonably manage, what species pose the biggest threat to, and have the biggest impacts on the landscape. So you'll see this photo is 2 years later, so this is 2017, the garlic mustard is no longer on the left-hand side, and so it's allowed for regeneration of goldenrod. So best practices for species like garlic mustard are incredibly useful. We do note that there are some gaps in best practices for some species in terms of community-based projects. And so that led to that was sort of the impetus for a research partnership that we developed in 2018 with the City, Humber College, and EcoSpark. So this project was to look at the efficacy of Lynn Short's manual spading technique for removal of Phragmites. So prior to this partnership, Lynn Short had produced a report on her research in cottage country. And so this project was to look at sites in an urban context and to apply a volunteer model to using this technique. So if you're not familiar with this technique of removal for Phragmites, this is what it is. It's a simple method of manual removal that involves cutting individual stems of Phragmites below soil surface level to remove the growth nodes. The overall goal is to starve the underground energy storage system, the rhizomes, by removing the above ground plant part. So volunteers in the CSP have been using this technique since 2015 or 2016 in some cases, and we could see that it was effective. But by developing this research partnership, we could show how it is effective when used by volunteers. So I will note that this method is included in the updated OIPC best practice for Phragmites now, which looks really great, by the way. Thank you, OIPC. So there was a report that was produced, and so it was published by EcoSpark. I have a handy little QR code here that you can scan to get a link to it. I also have that at the end of the presentation. If you're interested in taking a deeper look, it will outline how the study was set up and what the results of the study were. Just a brief conclusion. This is sort of an overview of a more in-depth conclusion, but all sites saw an improvement when spaded 1 time per season compared to cutting. Plots that were spaded 2 times per season saw an even more notable suppression of Phragmites. And the EcoSpark also performed a community science survey, and they found that volunteers felt empowered by being involved in the study, and they learned a lot about how the best practices are developed for invasive species removal. So here's a photo from 2015, and so this shows a Phragmites patch at Milne Hollow. Shout out to Milne Hollow volunteers in the audience or previous Milne Hollow volunteers. This is one of our sites along the Don River. And you can see on the left-hand side here, there's some frag under the willow, and then of course, lots of it back here behind this volunteer. So this area was about 300 square meters, which gives you a sense of an area that is manageable with a group of committed volunteers, about 10 volunteers each week. Considering we have other priorities as well, so Phragmites is not the only species we're managing, but using the spading technique, we've seen amazing results. So if you look at this photo from 2022, as I was sort of looking at the photo, I noticed this one stem of Phragmites, but that is all to say that it is very manageable now. So it takes one volunteer probably half an hour every couple of weeks to go through the entire site and spade any stems that pop up. But we've seen a lot of plants just emerge from the seed bank, including cattails, jewelweed, we have asters. So it has been such a successful project. So successful that it led to the development of another research partnership, this time again with Lynn Short from Humber College, but looking at manual removal methods for dog-strangling vine. So we set up study plots at Milne Hollow once again, and volunteers were able to contribute community science data for that study. And so Lynn hasn't quite, I think that her final results will be published in the Humber College Journal very soon, so I don't have those results to share with you yet. But I do want to mention what we've learned through these partnerships. So of course, with any project, you have limitations and hopefully you have lots of successes. So what we found were there were issues with consistent data collection, and I think that could be said for many studies. There's also a lot of time management involved to collect the required data. So with that piece, we found that it required partnership. So we can't necessarily do this sort of work in-house, and that's why having an organization like EcoSpark was so beneficial, because they could lead volunteers in the data collection. And also, I should note that setting up a research plot in an urban environment is not necessarily the easiest task. There aren't any untouched pieces of wilderness in Toronto, let's just put it that way. So we had some missing flag poles and markers for the project. So it's good to note that it's important to have a buried marker for your site and lots of tracking for where your study plots are. But the successes were great, and that's what keeps us engaging in partnerships like this. So volunteers gained an understanding of the study methodology. They were involved in helping inform best practices. And then we had the success of effectively managing the species. So I can't state enough that this project has transformed our management of Phragmites and CSP sites, where we're dealing with an infestation that is manageable by a volunteer group. It is such a great success. So just a few notes on conclusion. Community science projects successfully engage volunteers in the natural environment and help to empower them. These research partnerships are effective in understanding and contributing to best practices. And we also acknowledge that there are gaps in research around volunteer invasive species management. So we're always looking for new organizations to work with to narrow these gaps and to understand invasive management better in this volunteer context. So I want to thank you all for listening. And if you have questions that come up afterwards, or if you just want to reach out to us, you can contact us at greentoronto@toronto.ca. I will pop the link to the Phragmites report into the chat in just a moment. And I'm just going to...
You do have 2 minutes for questions if you want, Emily.
Oh, wonderful.